Hi, I'm Roy Crowne from Revelation Trust, and welcome to Gospel Entrepreneurs. Throughout this podcast, I will speak to entrepreneurial leaders in the church, community, and business who are finding new ways to expand the kingdom. Today, LJ, who is Director of Hope for Every Home Ireland, joins me. She's got an incredible entrepreneurial spirit and heart for the whole of Ireland. Welcome, LJ.
Thank you, Roy. It is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, why is the LJ? Where did that come from, Linda? What happened there?
Well, it's actually Linda Jane, Roy. So, my mum will be listening to this thinking, no, it is not Linda, it is Linda Jane. So, yes, christened Linda Jane. My both grandparents were Jane, so they felt the need to burden me with a double-barreled name. So, in school then, I automatically received LJ, and that has stuck with me until now.
Obviously, you're based in Northern Ireland. Portadown is actually where you live. But give us your journey of faith, just a little bit, so that we know who you are and who we're listening to. That would be really helpful.
From a young age, I suppose life was quite turbulent. It was brought up in a family where my mum had had a Christian upbringing. My dad hadn't. My mum worked a lot, but my dad was an alcoholic. So life was quite fractured. We were sent to Sunday school. We were sent to different meetings. And from a very young age, I learnt stories in the Bible and I had an awareness of who God was. But as I say, home was difficult. My dad was very abusive. He was physically, emotionally, sexually abusive to myself. So obviously life was very difficult. I didn't understand what was happening as a child. And as I grew up and I started to realise that what had happened was wrong, I became a very bitter teenager, a very angry teenager, a very confused one. And then that's when I started to use alcohol, I started to use drugs. And then I went in that path, just trying, I suppose, to forget about the stuff that had happened and I suppose try to get out of the house as far as possible. And a lot of that was a big secret. I had kept that to myself. I suppose with it came the shame and the guilt, and that was misplaced. That wasn't mine to carry. But at about the age of 16 then I was invited to a Christian event, and it was there at that Christian event I was reminded of what I'd heard as a child going to Sunday school or going to kids clubs, and it was there that I was introduced to this Jesus who loved me, and a Jesus who understood the pain that I'd been through. And it was that night that I committed my life to him. So I went on this journey of Christianity, and as you read the Bible, you read about forgiveness and reconciliation, and then that set me on a journey to find healing and to be able to forgive my dad and actually eventually reconcile with him. So that was a whole big long journey, and I wouldn't have time to go into all of that today. But God has been so very faithful to me. In that, I have been blessed with an incredible husband, and that has been an absolute gift. And God has took what was a very ugly part of my life, and he really has redeemed it into something significant and something very beautiful. And I'm so thankful to him. It's a miracle what God has done in my life.
It's amazing the person you are now, LJ, when you think of that background, but that is the redemption of God. That is what God does, and it's just so fantastic to see that. You went off into kind of HR and personnel, didn't you? That was your kind of journey. Now we're going to look at where you are now, but why did you go into that? Because that's not exactly entrepreneurial, is it, HR?
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. I suppose what happened was, like I said, it was a very fractured upbringing. I felt that I couldn't go to university. I couldn't leave my mum on her own. And I then went down the route of I got into finance. I worked my way up in finance and did well in that. And along the line, I've seen how some businesses didn't do HR very well. And I suppose I'm that kind of person who loves to see justice. I love to see things done fairly and right. So I suppose that passion then was ignited in me about how can I be part of the change and how can I help businesses to look after employees really well. And I started dipping my toe into HR, where I would do like a dual role where it would be finance and HR. And then eventually I realized that actually I really love people and I really love business. And I really want to be that person in between that just kind of brings the two together in a really healthy way. So HR felt like that was a really good fit. So I did my qualifications and worked hard at that. And then and got myself into some HR roles. And that's been great. And I still have a passion for HR and I still have a passion for the business world.
And it was interesting because when we first had a conversation, LJ, you were still in HR, working for a company that had a number of care homes. But you were sensing, hey, maybe God's given me a bit of a passion for prayer, but also the evangelistic gift was in you as well. And there was an opportunity that was coming up in Northern Ireland. Give us a bit of that story, LJ.
Yeah, so if you imagine just off the back of COVID, in church life, I was always very much involved in prayer initiatives, in evangelism. That's kind of always been something that's been, that I've been doing. I would have maybe set up prayer rooms. We had actually established a house of prayer in Portadown along with a friend who is also a ministry leader here. And we were doing that. And then bang smack comes COVID. Everything stops. The house of prayer stops. Everything stops. And I remember one Sunday morning coming off the back of COVID when church was just starting to get back to normal. And I remember sitting there and our pastor preached this message, and it was a challenge to basically ask, is the yes that you once had for Jesus, is that the same yes that you have for today? And I thought straight away, of course it is. But God, what can I do? Our women's ministry isn't happening. Prayer stuff isn't happening. None of this stuff is going on right now. And I just did a very simple prayer. I just said, God, if you give me an opportunity, I'll say yes. And I suppose to give even greater context, 20 years ago, I'd been given a word that somebody had said that I would go into Ireland and I would share the gospel across Ireland. And at that time, that made no sense to me. I just thought, wow, well, I mean, that's what we should all be doing. But, it always kind of was there in the background. So then we're in church that Sunday, the word's been said. I prayed this very simple prayer. And 48 hours later, my friend contacts me and says there's an opportunity to promote a prayer app in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland. Would you be interested in that? And I thought, I've just taken on this new promotion and work. This is kind of the level where I want to be, in HR. And I thought, goodness me, but how can I say no to that? I'm really passionate about connecting people in prayer. So I think about it, I pray about it, and it was just a no-brainer. I then decided, right, okay, I could do this 2 days and maybe I could do my other job 3 days. But as I started to work that out practically, I realized that actually what would happen would be I'd be so overstretched. The other job just couldn't have been done in 3 days, even with help. And it didn't feel right. So I took a very big leap of faith and decided that I would resign from that job. And within hours, I had been offered another job, which was walking distance from my house for 3 days a week as an HR manager. So I did that 3 days a week. And then I stepped into this other position of Hope for Every Home for 2 days a week.
And so now you're entrepreneurial all the time. So all of a sudden you grab this and you're like, oh, I'm not sure about the Oikos app, which is what we talked about. We'll come back to that later. But then you discover 2 days you're giving your time to this, but you're 3 days in this new job that came your way. But in the end, you're like, I can't do this.
Yeah, so I soon realized that actually probably there was a need for the ministry here on the island of Ireland. People wanted resources, so we do other resources. So we've done an outreach magazine and we printed off 10,000 copies and we distributed them really quickly. And there was other stuff that people were wanting. People wanted to meet. People were having events. They want you to be at them. I just soon realized that 2 days just wasn't enough. So then I went to 3 days and 2 days in the other job. And I'm just so thankful that other job were so accommodating. So they were an absolute gift to me. Then all of a sudden then I'm doing 3.5 days of Hope for Every Home, and I'm doing 1.5 days with the other company, and then next day I'm doing 4 days and I'm doing 1 day, and it just eventually got to the point where it was like I had to say to the company, and they knew it. I just think we didn't think it would happen just so quickly. We thought maybe in a few years, but we're just so thankful to God that the ministry is growing and that His favours on it. So then I gave up the other job, and now I do Hope for Every Home every day.
And somebody that's listening to this, LJ, obviously there was a bit of a journey. There was a word 20 years ago. You kind of put that on the back burner and see what that is. Somebody may think, I've had those kind of things that happen. What would you say to them just as kind of part of your journey? What have you learned that if someone's listening, they may have had a word when they were a young child or whatever, and it's never happened. What would you say to them, LJ, from what you've come through?
Okay, I think my best advice is don't get so caught up and so focused on the word. I think the best thing to do is just be so faithful with your yes. Whatever it is that God puts in front of you, be faithful with that and give to that. And don't despise, the day of small beginnings. If something comes your way and it just seems so much smaller than what you think it should be, just give to it and just be faithful with it and just be thankful and all of that. I think that's just something I've always tried to have this being willing, that whatever God would ask me to do, that I'd be willing and that I would say yes and that I would just be faithful with what he puts before me. So I suppose that's my best advice.
And the great thing is Jesus says if you're faithful in a little, you'll be faithful in much. So that's small things. And don't despise the beginning of small things, because you never know what's going to happen. But you're a bit of an entrepreneur. You're constantly saying to me, we should produce this, we should produce that, we should do that. Where did that come from, LJ? This whole merchandise thing that you're doing around the ministry, where's that come from?
Pre this, I've always loved trying to earn a little bit extra, try to do something work a little bit smarter. I've done things like I've sold candles. I've done things like where I made, produced and sold jewelry, where I sold skincare stuff. So there's always been that kind of little thing in the background where it's just have a little businessy kind of thing in the background. But to be able to actually start new innovative things for the gospel, that's just pure gold. That is that's just great to be able to do that. So I think some of it comes from probably, the whole being intuitive, intuition. I think it comes with maybe years of different experience along the way, and then just having this God-given intuition of just thinking, I think that'll work. Let's try it. And being a little bit risky and just going for it.
Yeah, and clearly it's been very successful. Do you think there's much more of that entrepreneurial spirit that we need to find within the church?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think there's people in the church, and I think that leaders in the church need to make room for it. I definitely think that there needs to be praying into that and letting those people come up with their ideas and giving them an opportunity to use that entrepreneurial spirit. And definitely I think that we need to be much more aware of that.
And obviously you're now the project director for Hope for Every Home in Ireland. How's that been in stepping out of business into ministry, LJ? What are the differences? What are some of the things we need to learn from business and some of the things that you've seen in ministry? Because you've been in it now a year full time. Give us some of that, because some people listening, they're either in a ministry context or in a business context. Give us some of that.
So I have seen that it is very different. And I suppose for me, it was nearly a culture shock. So it was things like whenever I send an email in the workplace, it gets responded to within an hour, 2 hours maybe. And when you send an email from Hope for Every Home, it could be a week, 2 weeks. You might not even get a response. You might not. It's a completely different pace. In some ways, it's very, very busy ministry, but in other ways, response rate is much slower. In some ways, it feels like business can be so much more strategic and so much more, where we have tick lists, we have a process in how we do it, whereas ministry sometimes feels like it can be so much more spirit-led and less of that. But actually, I feel like that's probably an unfair, because I do think there's so many people who are doing it strategically and spirit-led, which we're really trying hard to do as well at this side. But it's so different. People are different. Response rates are different. It's just different. So it is.
And that's a culture, isn't it? It's a cultural context that you've kind of realised and moved into in that space. So LJ, give us, in Northern Ireland, obviously I'm in England, I'm married into Northern Ireland, my wife's from Northern Ireland. It's a very different context for ministry over there. Some of our listeners may not be aware of that. Tell us what your strategy is or what you're planning to do with Hope for Every Home in Ireland.
Yeah, well, firstly, you're very blessed that a Northern Irish woman wanted to marry you, Roy. So congratulations. And that she's kept you for this long. So you're very, very blessed.
I agree. Totally.
And she's lovely. I've met her. So she is very lovely. So context, yeah, over in Northern Ireland, it wouldn't take you long to go through history archives to realise that we have a very fractured past when it comes to religion and tradition. So we have to be very careful with what we produce. We try to produce things that are non-political. We try to ensure that people aren't offended, that they can use our resources in whatever context that is. So whether that is a predominantly Protestant context or whether that is predominantly Catholic, that our resources can be used. We want them to reach every area of society, and we don't want them to be stumbling blocks for people. So we do just have to be really careful of language. So it's just sometimes can be a bit tricky to navigate that, but I feel like we're doing that well at the minute, and hopefully that will continue.
And tell us about the idea that you've got with this uniforms and all that, because that's a bit entrepreneurial, and what you're looking at do there to serve the community around school uniforms. Where did that come from, LJ?
Yes, so as Hope for Everyone has grown, we also took on Rhoda, who does 8 hours a week for us. And Rhoda had been involved in a school uniform bank in her own church. And we had seen the benefits of doing this. And we felt that this could be something where we create a resource that other churches could do. So basically, there's a lot of schools in Northern Ireland that do pre-loved uniforms in their school, and these are done over term time. Now, they're not done in every school, they're just done in some schools. And we felt that the church could help partner with primary schools, secondary schools, and they could partner to also run uniform banks. So whether that looked like they would just run a uniform bank for some local schools, or whether that would look like they would partner and do it in the summer months when the local schools are closed. But we really felt that church could be part of that, the solution, part of the answer to children having the uniforms that they need. So basically, the churches would get a resource pack, and it would tell them a how-to guide of how to set one up. They would get branding, they would get email scripts, telephone scripts of what they would say to a school when they're contacting them. That's all done for them in this pack. And then the hope is that when people come to a church to get a uniform, or whether they come to a Christian organisation to get a uniform, that they would also receive gospel literature with that uniform, and they would also receive some other good resources from local ministries that are doing a good work across Northern Ireland, that care for the family in different places.
Is there anything that you don't do that doesn't think creatively about the funding stream and the prayer ministry? Because you've really integrated those two together in a very significant way to be a gospel entrepreneur in the ministry that you do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if there's something that I'm not doing that way, well, then I need to review that. But no, we try to do that way all the time. We try to just kind of connect dots and just be really collaborative. And I suppose that comes from my previous job, just about being efficient and working smarter and work rather than working harder.
And we're looking at doing a Gospel Entrepreneurs event in Northern Ireland, a bit of a launch that I know you're part of, LJ, aren't you?
Yes, really looking forward to that. That's on the 29th of November. It'll be held in the T3 Centre at Pickering in Lisburn. And we can't wait. And we would love to see other entrepreneurs in the room, just gleaning insight and networking with other people and like-minded people. So it would be great. And if you have some of that entrepreneurial spirit and you're listening today, we would love to see you there.
Brilliant. LJ, is there anything that you'd love to tell people that have listened to your story, that have connected? You've been on an amazing journey. This season of it, you're loving it because it kind of sits into all your gifts, doesn't it? Finance, HR, loving people, the business side of it. It's a great fit for you, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's just been an absolute gift, and it has been something that I would never have envisaged myself doing, because I just probably never felt that the opportunity was out there. So I suppose to anybody who's listening, don't underestimate what God can do in your life, and don't be afraid to say yes to God, and don't be afraid to take a risk, and just lean in and surround yourself with good people as well. Get a good network of people around you just to pray for you and just to encourage you in whatever it is that you believe that God's put in your heart.
Great. LJ, it's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, LJ, for joining me today. LJ gave us some great little nuggets, gems there. Faithful in a little, faithful in much. And when you say yes to Jesus, who knows what opportunities he will bring you. So thanks, LJ. I'll be back with another gospel entrepreneur, but make sure to check out all the previous episodes we've done on the UCB Player app. Thank you for listening. Gospel Entrepreneurs is a UCB podcast in partnership with the Revelation Trust.